Thank you. And thank you to everyone who came out this afternoon. We hope you enjoy this conversation. I'm really excited about it because even though it is history, it is the what happened with the Freedmen's Bank continues to have tremendous and significant impacts and effects on the economic health of the Black community, and as such, the overall our overall economy and country. All these years later, it continues to resonate, and we're going to get into that. But first of all, how many people have ever heard of the Freedmen's Bank? Okay, all right, good for y'all. Because a lot of people go, "What's that?" And they never heard of it. They were surprised to hear that it was founded, and especially surprised to hear about its demise. So Rodney has written, I think, an important book because it will fill in the blanks for our history. And again, it's not just Black history; it's American history, and it'll also help us figure out where we are and where we need to go. So let's get going. Um, the book chronicles as he says, the rise and fall of the Freedmen's Bank, which was established in 1865 after the Civil War, during that period of Reconstruction, when it looked like some people in the country thought we should try to do the right thing. And it was primarily established to provide a place for Black soldiers who had served in the Civil War on the Union side to deposit their money and to grow their savings. And there was also this thought that it would be a way to provide newly emancipated Black people with a chance to save money and get a financial foothold to, to be full Americans. But as so many things that happened during that period, it was not lasting. In just under 10 years, just under a decade, the Freedmen's Bank went under. And we're going to talk about why that happened. And I would also throw out that the bank's folding left 61,144 depositors, almost all of them Black people, soldiers, but also men and women who had, regular jobs, even kids. Just everybody was excited about saving. And they lost nearly $3 million, which in today's money would be 80 million. And as Rodney points out in the book, and as we'll talk about, there's this, theft. So all those years ago contributes to the ongoing racial wealth gap in this country. It is also an interesting part of the discussion about reparations. People, say, "Well, I never owned slaves." No, but perhaps you participated in some of the systems of this country that rob Black people of their ability to generate capital, own property, start businesses, and just create generational wealth. So we're going to get into some of those issues in specific, and that's enough. I don't want to take up all the time. Want please also to give you guys a chance to just have a conversation with Rodney. So I guess tell us how you came to do this book, Rodney.
Well, my last book was on the racial wealth gap. And when you're looking at the reasons for the racial wealth gap, people look at many things, including, slavery, Jim Crow, the redlining. But sort of a lost part of the history was basically the rise and the fall of the Freedmen's Bank. Mm-hmm. So a publisher was interested in me writing the book. So, and we have, it's incredible the records that we have in the National Archive, actually in College Park. But the more, it was it took some, you know, it took some doing and some history, looking at history, but it was, there is such a rich history. There are so many records available. They actually have the passbooks for hundreds of depositors. I mean, you know, and these people, former slaves, were making deposits of like $1 or $5. And they have hundreds of those passbooks at the National Archives. But you know, just to talk about the bank and how it grew and why it failed, I'm going to do that quickly, because the
Wait,
bank.
before you get started, clarify one thing, and I should have said that in my introduction. There was this misnomer that it was a black bank. It was not. So please tell us, you know, what it was, who ran it, and who ran it into the ground.
Well, it was, and okay, and that's part of the story because the bank was created in 1865. Congress approved it. Abraham Lincoln signed it into law, but he was assassinated 3 months later. Basically, it was created by Congress, and it was heavily marketed to former slaves, and it was marketed like it was backed by the federal government, and which it was not. It was basically, they agreed to start this bank. There was no capital. I mean, some of the officers actually had to lend the bank money to get started. So to start without capital, for one, and then to start it, they created a board of directors of 50 white male businessmen. Okay, and you know, it was advertised heavily to especially to Black Civil War soldiers, because they were getting paid. And they needed a way to send money to their families, but also they would get pensions, and they had no way to put it because white banks didn't accept them. So it grew. So it was created, and I should say first, Congress only intended for the bank to have one branch, and that was to be in Washington, D.C. Somehow that got lost in the legislation. So it ended up being 37 branches, mostly in, I mean, there were branches in New York City, Philadelphia, Baltimore. The headquarters was in New York, and then it moved to Washington. But in Atlanta, mostly in southern and southwestern states, they were basically chasing where the Black Civil War soldiers were stationed. So, you know, in Beaumont, South Carolina, for one, small cities like that. Now, it would have been impossible for even the white institutions to basically operate with 37 branches that are at that time. So it was weeks. You know, it took weeks.
Why do you say that? Why do you say that?
Because there was no, you know, it took like a week for communication to go from one place to, from the headquarters to the other. You know, most of the people who they hired to run these branches were inexperienced, and many of them were incompetent as well. And so the communication was bad. The bank was underfunded. They expanded too fast, but primarily towards the end, it only lasted 9 years. Towards the end, the administration, the bankers who were in charge, started basically doing really shady things. They started making loans to each other. Now, this is a bank. This is a bank where in the legislation that created it, it outlawed loans. So the administrators of this bank started making loans to whites with the Black folks' money, and they couldn't even make loans to Black people. Okay, so that was one. So and all of these. Okay, most of these loans turned bad. Okay, they were not repaid, and then you have bankers who were in charge, who were involved with other banks, and they were exchanging their toxic assets for the assets of the Freedmen's Savings Bank. So the books were bad. So you had corruption, you had incompetence, and you had basically growth, and then you had a depression that was sort of the final thing that led to the collapse of the bank.
And there wasn't any recourse. I know you talk about in the book how it wasn't created under what would have then, I suppose, been Treasury, but I think it was like the Office of the Comptroller or something.
Right.
But it would have been the equivalent of Treasury, which would have had rules about how to run the bank. The bank was created separate from that agency, so it had no oversight, and it was unable to help when things went bad.
The oversight was supposed to come from Congress, and of course it did not. It could not, so there was basically no one looking at it. There was no real oversight. You know, it was years later that the FDIC insurance came. So when the bank did collapse, people were left with no recourse. Now Congress did say they would try to repay depositors, but most of the depositors were poor. Most of them received nothing, and some who did receive something, it took them years to get it. So and let's talk about the corruption. The Senate actually investigated the collapse of the bank, and they said they actually named the officers who should have been indicted, but no one ever was. Nobody ever went to jail. Nobody ever went to trial over this.
And another interesting note in the bank's history, toward the end, they brought in a prominent African American who invested his own money to try to save it. Can you tell us about that?
And that was Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass, they brought in to try to stabilize things, and Frederick Douglass deposited $10,000 of his own money. And then he got a look at the books, and he was like, God, what did I do? He said, basically, it was hopeless. It was, the books were so bad that a year after they brought Frederick Douglass in, the bank folded. They never say I've never seen anything that said whether he got his money back. I just know most of the poor depositors did not.
So
and the depositors who did get their money back were not made whole. Okay, let's just say that.
So you and we'll talk a little bit more, then we'll take questions. You talk about in the book how this connects to today. The cynical view of some people, a lot of people, is that, well, that was a long time ago. Y'all had plenty of time to get your act together by now. Stop whining and complaining. But how is that continuing to affect the economic health of Black people in general and the country? Because whatever happens to us, really also affects the country.
Well, in a bunch of ways. Now, if you just sort of imagine, okay, we're talking about $3 million, and these weren't rich folks. Okay, if you look at the deposit, the books, people were depositing $1, people were depositing $5, and some of them had as much as $100. But this was money that they needed for for education of their children. This is what money they needed to buy homes. This is money that they needed to buy seed to plant, and towards the end, there were about 10% of the depositors were white, and they were mostly educated and mostly in the urban areas. Those folks got their money out before the bank folded. Okay.
How is that possible?
Okay.
How is that possible?
Now, and that's because they were probably they were in a position to be able to know what was going on at the time and know the bank was in trouble. These poor people that on the farms had they had word of mouth. That was the best. So that was one of the things you had this generational wealth that was lost. Okay, imagine if these people were going to buy homes and farmland, that money was gone unexpectedly, and so actually someone did a study of the children of the people who lost money who lived in the vicinity of the branches, and they found that most of those children were not able to continue education because of that. So that was one thing. Generational wealth was a big part of it. Another thing that I talk about is basically distrust of banks. I mean, even over generations, people passed this distrust over generations. It wasn't, it's not like, it's not like, people die and you never, and they don't talk to their children about, okay, this is, we lost our money. I'm not putting my money in the bank again. So we lost faith in banks, and you still see some of that today. Now, you might say, it was this was in 1874 that this happened, and you think we're still feeling the impact of that. And one thing I compare it to is the syphilis study. I mean, we lost faith in healthcare, and that's and for generations to come. So yes, so we still have a distrust of banks, financial institutions. I mean, and that was institutionalized by the racism and discrimination that followed in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s. Sure. So that's a big part of it. We have a distrust that goes through generations of financial institutions in general, and that is affecting the way we can grow wealth.
Mm-hmm. So what do we do? Where do we go from here? What lessons do we take away from this? I think I asked you if you knew if there were. I think I read something not too long ago where somebody suggested this should be a part of the reparations conversation. Other people said it should be separate. Here's a definable thing that we can point out where Black people were robbed, and the country should make them whole, which is kind of unlikely, possibly. So what do we do about it? What do we do with this information, with this knowledge to, improve?
Well, you're right. It's unlikely, but reparations. This is one where you actually have records. They have incredible records, so they know who lost money and how much. Okay, so this is not like general things like reparations. Okay, who gets reparations? This is where you have specific names. You look at the National Archive. You can look at the passbooks. And they know who received, and the ones who did receive something received only a fraction of what they had deposited. So reparations, I mean, you could call it something, you can call it that, you can call it something else, but that's something that could happen because they have the supporting documents. And then you can talk about the more general things that would help narrow or reduce the racial wealth gap. You could talk about reparations in general. You could talk, and reparations, support for reparations sort of grew dramatically during the social justice protests during the pandemic. And then it dropped precipitously after that, like all of the promises. So reparations is a real thing. And there are programs, and when we talk about addressing the wealth gap, there are programs some cities have started, including Washington, D.C., which is called the direct payments. So they basically pay, say 2,000 poor residents of the city. You give them $2,000 a month and in a funding cycle, and they have evidence that that works. Okay, that it doesn't make people stay home. You know, they still work, and it does provide them a higher standard of living. And you know, it was actually a program started by a former mayor of Oakland, California, but it's spread. So that's one option. Another option is baby bonds, which is sort of growing in importance. Basically, people have governments. The government could do it, but cities are doing it, and states are doing it. And Senator Cory Booker has legislation that would basically provide the one that says you start out with $1,000. Every baby born in America gets $1,000, and every year it's added to it, and people with the lower income get more money than the people with the higher income. So by the time they grow into become 18, they have money to maybe put down on a house or buy a car, and that actually there, you know, a major brokerage has said that would basically cut the racial wealth gap in half. So that's a option, and there's a strong opposition to that as well.
Yeah, there's some opposition to everything. Let me ask: are black banks an answer? Did what happened there also carry over to black banks? And I know there weren't black banks at the time. I think in your book, I forget the date, you said the first one was established, but it was well after that debacle. But is that something that should be something we could do for ourselves as opposed to waiting for?
You know, there are, I think, 47 black banks. I know there's Industrial Bank here, and there's Harbor Bank in Baltimore, but they are small. They have, and they try to serve their community as best they could. They don't have, I think, the resources to do that. They are doing what they can to basically help struggling, small businesses. So no, unless there's tremendous growth and growth in their assets, that I don't think that's a viable alternative. I mean,
And in the general banking industry, it looks like discrimination continues to be an issue. Discrimination, chicanery, bad loans, undercover redlining continues. A lot of things continue.
And the distrust continues.
Yeah.
We still don't trust those financial institutions. The biggest thing there is basically that distrust has led us to not save or invest, and the way to grow wealth and the way to grow generational wealth is through investing and saving. And, Black Americans grow old with very little in savings and the heavy dependence on Social Security. And the average Social Security check is about $1,500. I mean, the average. And more Black people than white Americans end up retiring early. And when I say retiring early, I mean 62, where you basically lock yourself into a low retirement for life. I mean, you can't come back and redo that. So that's one of the reasons you end up with Black Americans have a much lower rate of Social Security than but they're also more heavily dependent on Social Security because they aren't taking it because they want to. They're taking it because they have to.
I see. Well, on that note, I think we should take some questions from the audience.
You go ahead.
This gentleman back here, and then Mr. Hudson.
Thank you very much. I just wondering if you had any specific examples how that might have affected the development of Industrial Bank, particularly their recovery after the Depression.
You're asking how it affected the industrial bank?
Or black banks in general, but if you had any specific examples of how it affected industrial here in the capital.
Well, yes. Well, I can't say because as far as black folks were concerned, this was a black bank. Okay, so I can't say specifically. When the first black bank started, they didn't go but all I can say is they thought this was a black bank, and they thought this was a black bank where they lost their money. So the distrust of banks didn't just mean distrust of white banks, because as far as the small depositors were concerned, this was a black bank. Okay, so.
Hudson.
Thank you.
There's a mic.
Thank you. The question being, why was the bank formed? Why did the Congress do this? One, particularly when you consider they could not make loans to African Americans. What was the purpose of this?
Well, basically, the slaves, the newly freed slaves, could not deposit their money. There was nowhere for them to deposit their money. Okay, and so there were abolitionists in the North who thought that not only the newly freed slaves needed a place to put their money, but probably more importantly, the black soldiers who fought in the Civil War, okay, they got bonuses, they got pensions, and there was nowhere for them to keep that money. So that was basically the reasoning behind that. And actually, there were a couple of Union generals who created banks for the black troops, because before the reasons I just talked about. The idea with Mr. Algood, who was one of the abolitionists who was spearheaded this, John Algood, was that we needed a place. We not only needed a place to put our money. The soldiers needed a place to put their money. The soldiers needed a way to send money to their families, and this was supposed to be a way. In addition, if the bank was successful, and the idea was that it would actually hire black people to be tellers and work in the banks. So it would also work and to increase our financial skills and financial literacy.
So it sounds like somebody maybe had a good intention. And I think one of the things you point out in the book is that some people thought that because of that sort of social, economic intent was probably not the best way to start a business, okay? But so if it started out, let's say, okay, fine, we all think you should have started out as a business with money and this, and that, not as a do-gooder thing. But if the good people, quote unquote, who started it, what happened to them? How did they sort of let it fall to the clutches of the crooks and,
Well, the board, okay, so basically this board, when I talk about the board of 50 really prominent businessmen, there was some question as to whether some of them actually even knew that they were on the board. I mean, they basically took these prominent people's names, okay, and then the second thing was they were prominent businessmen. They didn't have time to watch the bank, and eventually over time, I think. As it became difficult and more difficult, and you see all the issues that were coming up, including the communications. I mean, they were struggling. Because one, transferring money transferring money, trying to get money from a small town and a small branch in Texas to D.C. There were so many issues that
Yes,
there
they
was,
didn't have the push button back, and you had to get on the Pony Express, I suppose.
right, and so that it took like a week for communication to get from Washington D.C. headquarters to New Orleans. So eventually there was turnover, and it was not the abolitionists who actually founded it. It ended up in the hands of bankers who had ulterior motives.
Interesting.
Because the abolitionists who started it weren't businessmen. Okay, and it had the bank had a very strong missionary component which it was probably more spreading the missionary. So many of the people who were hired to work in the branches were missionaries. They weren't financial people. So.
Oh.
Hello, sir. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
It's an honor to chat with you. My name is Angel Ridge. I am the first Black woman to start a neobank and the second Black woman to start a bank, period. And it's called Credit Rich. And I think where you just ended is exactly where I would like to present my question. Previously, Black banks struggled because of the distribution mechanism, as well as I would say because of the chartering with different Black banks that we just discussed as well. Well, for the first time ever, we have the opportunity to be able to connect people and banks and assets digitally, which is why we've built an AI fintech bank. So in your opinion, now that we have technology at our disposal, and now that we have a Black woman that is partnered with Experian and Visa and is about to launch this national bank, how can we better connect all the Black banks together, all of the Black people, regain the trust, and actually be able to move forward with a system that would be beneficial to our community? I'm also the author of History of the Black Dollar, and I have a chapter on the Freedmen's Bank as well.
Oh, okay. Good. No, I think basically we've Black the masses of Black folks are now utilizing white banks, white institutions. So I think the biggest part of that, and you mentioned trust, okay, is trust, and I think. Financial. I always hesitant to talk about financial literacy because we don't want to blame Black folks for not being financially literate when that was beyond our, that was not our fault. So I think a good part is, a good part is marketing, and you have to market to the Black community quite different from you have to market to everyone else, and community ties. So that's what I think Black banks have to do, and make sure they offer. And one thing I don't think Black banks do is financial education. I think we could do better there. I think that's one way we can do some outreach into the Black community. Okay.
I think this lady.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much for this book. I am so excited.
Thank you. Thank you.
Secondly, in doing my personal family research, it always broke my heart to see the deposits in Freedmen's Bank. And third, I want to say, these are the same people that were educable. They were going to school, they were working, and that to me was a declaration of the recognition of their full citizenship, along with voting for those who were able to vote. That travesty and the reciprocation that people were able to take those assets and sack them, to me would be the first point of reference for reparations, because it's all documented. It is my understanding that Frederick Douglass put 60,000 of his own dollars into the bank to try to shore it up
$10,000.
10,000, okay. What, is it 60 in these days? I don't know, but I remember it was a lot. And it was shocking that he lost such a big part of his asset. So what are your feelings on starting at something that was so well documented to try to reach out to the descendants of those whose depositors, calculate what their value would be, and distribute back what their investment had been?
Okay, I'm sorry. So the question is,
What are your thoughts in terms of reparations?
Are we- Oh, yeah.
Starting with the bank depositors and researching out their descendants and paying to them.
yeah, I think that's the easiest. That would be the easiest part of reparations. I mean, because the history is there, the documentation is there, but you know, I don't know if I would put it in the same bag as reparations in general, because you got documents there. You could trace back the generations and see who lost their money. So yes, I think reparations is a good place to start, but I think reparations in this case should be separate, and because you have proof.
Can I ask you to pick out a family or a person that you ran across and just tell what happened to them, like how much they put in, what happened? Were they, some of the people you talk about in the book?
Okay.
Yeah. Here.
We have hair mics, so I have to.
Oh, I have to hold it.
You have to hold it. Yes.
I got the right initials right. VW Vanaway.
Okay, so basically, when they first started the bank and the passbook, they required an incredible. They required these former slaves to write down or basically dictate a lot of information, including who their slave owners were, where they're from, their sisters and brothers. But most of the past books, but eventually they got past that, and the past books had just basically the information. It's also interesting that that a lot of these maybe 20% of the passbook holders were kids, and who I'm gonna read about one who has been written about because she had so much information. Okay, so I'm going to read directly. So one example of one depositor who has been written about often is Dilla Warren, who is 50 years old, a widow of a black Civil War soldier, Oscar Warren. Oscar has served in the U.S. Colored Troops Infantry, Regiment 36 Company, and he died in an Army hospital on December 1st, 1864. So Dilla Warren opened an account in New Bern, North Carolina branch in November 2nd, 1869. And her records show the effect slavery had on the stability or instability of the black family. So born in Chorin County, North Carolina, she made a living from sewing, knitting, washing, and ironing, despite being crippled. Her first husband, Pompey Nixon, was sold away. Her records in her signature record lists 11 of her 15 children, including those who either died or were sold. Her father, Ned Clark, was sold 30 years before the Civil War. Her mother, Harriet Nixon, along with her two brothers, Ned and Allen, were sold 17 years before the war. Another brother, Andrew, was killed by lightning. Her signature records also provide the names of two sisters, Anna Carter, who was sold 35 years before she opened her account, and Maria Gregory. Now, I'm going to just follow that up with one of the bank's records of depositor's book. Okay, Jacob Riley, a 22-year-old who had served with Company B of the 33rd United States Colored Troop. He opened an account, Savannah, Georgia branch, April 6, 1866. Although living in Screven County at the time he opened his account, he was born in Augusta, where he was owned by Josiah Sibley. Signature records indicated that when he served in the Army, he had been a cook for General Sherman. So, okay, now that one in particular didn't say how much he deposited in the account, but many of them did. You know, and many of them, many it was $1 or $5.
We do one more question? Sure. She's coming.
You mentioned that there were 47, currently that there are about 47 Black-owned banks in the U.S. Has there, maybe in the past or currently, has there been,
Sorry, can you speak up?
oh, sorry. Has there been any attempt in the past or maybe presently to kind of unify, not as one entity, but as a way to extend access to people in all areas, you know, using the collective power to do that? And if not, why do you think that hasn't been done? And are there any potential roadblocks to a system that would work that way?
Okay, nice. So, you know, one of the people I interviewed is doing a history of Black banks. And, okay, and so I did not delve deep into the Black banks, so I can't tell you why, if there's a system, but if there's a system connecting them all, or you know, I know there are trade groups, so I don't know why, and I you know, I just know they continue to be small, and they don't, you know, I think when we see new things like digital, you know, online banking, that's gonna help expand the scope of Black banking in general.
Okay, sure.
Greetings. I have two questions. The first one is, did the method of hiding your money under a mattress, not your money, but did that come from all the discrepancies and things that went on with the banks? People started hiding their money under their mattress?
Yes, that's part of the results of that you know, that mistrust that we've been talking about. That's been generational.
Yeah. And my other question, I forgot what it was. I'm sorry. Oh gosh, I forgot what the other question was. But I just wanted to say, my parents loved Freeman Bank. They talked about it all the time. They supported it. Was disappointed in what happened, and they raised us to support. You know, you shop anywhere, but support your neighborhood, support your community. They always said that, from little stores to big stores. And one time I went to a Black bank to cash a check. It was a small check somebody gave me, and it was from that bank. And they gave me such a hard way to go. And I already had 2 bank accounts other places, but it made me not want to come back. So I like what you said about, to the other young lady, about you have to build rapport and relationship with the community and the neighbors
Yes.
in order to gain their trust, just like Navy Federal did, and State Department Federal Credit Union, and Riggs Bank when they were here. Thank you.
So I'm just say the Freedmen's Bank, the building, no longer exists, but the building called the Freedmen's Bank building is the Treasury Annex at Pennsylvania and I think Madison, but they renamed it to the Freedmen's Bank building to basically honor the history of the Freedmen's Bank.
Anything else? Well, I think this was a good discussion, very important. Like I said, it's not history, it's still happening. And I mean, I think you would agree that probably economic power is, especially in this country, is vitally important. And it is important for us to figure out how to get, there was one very depressing data point in the book about, predictions that wealth in Black families was going to continue to plummet. So we really do need to get a grip, and hopefully this conversation will get us thinking about it, moving in that direction in some way, in whatever way works for you. Whether it's a question in the back. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Thank you. So anywho, thank you all very much. Mr. Brooks will be around for signing and additional conversation as time permits. Thank you so much.